It's time! Let's get ready to rumble! Of the fifth round, and very narrow the cast of Marquez. That's where power comes from. And it is back into a war again to end the sixth round.
And he's using his point jab to try and set that up.
No, you're right, because in previous fights we've seen that he seems kind of awkward, but in this fight he's not a little...
Speed difference, yeah. Wow, he tried a crescent kick on him. Anderson, oh, he got hit! Look at the finish it! And it's all over! Chris Weidman is the UFC middleweight champion! My goodness! Oh boy, Bogner might be ready to go! And he's gone! Canelo knocks out!
Staggered Thomas. And a right hand behind it. Thomas in trouble again. And now Tyson moves in for the kill. Two uppercuts and a left hand. Thomas trying to hold on. Serious trouble. And down he goes.
A lot of swelling on that right eye.
Yep. But honestly, that was honestly a
Those with a fighting spirit, and Ngannou is in black, Rosenstrike is in gray. Early inside leg kick is there for Biggie Boy. Oh! Oh!
It's on.
Rosenstrike is out!
Whoa!
Ngannou!
Out bad. Out.
Francis the Predator!
Just went through his foot like he was making some sort of an impact. Oh, good shot. From Joshua. He's in big trouble here. And he's got it. It's Joshua.
All of you, I know you got him. I know you got him picked, but the man's in trouble. I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Payday. You want payday. I know that.
Microphone check 1 2. What is this? The Knockout Zone podcast is finally here. This is episode number 1, and I am your humble and gracious, highly favored host, Kevin Solorzano, and I want to thank you guys for listening to this podcast. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Comment down. Let me know what you think down below, because this is the new home of boxing and MMA. That's right. That's what we're going to be talking about here if it wasn't obvious by the title. Now, I'm going to throw this out there to start off the episode. I'm 25 years old. Lately, this past year is where I become a big boxing fan, and this year alone is where I've been becoming a huge MMA fan. So I figured, hey, why not make it a show for both? Why not give you guys the perspective of a fan? I mean, I've done some training in boxing, so I have some experience there. Never really fought I haven't fought in amateurs yet or pro. Maybe one day, who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I just wanted to do this podcast. Shout out to the Boxing Voice. They're a huge, huge inspiration there to bring this podcast. And shout out to Ariel Helani with the MMA Hour. So in a way, I'm kind of trying to combine both and bring it here into one podcast. The goal eventually is to have upcoming boxers, upcoming MMA fighters on the show, talking to them about their journey and where they want to go in life. And, to have fans on here. Eventually I want to find a way to put fans on here, however that may be, get fans involved. So if you are a fan listening, I want to thank you guys. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and comment down. Let me know what you think down below. Now, let's get right into the business, talking about none other than what happened this past Saturday between Devin the Bank Haney versus George Kambosos Jr. Now that fight, man. Now that was a really good fight that was put on this past Saturday between Devin Haney and none other than George Kambosos Jr. in Australia. Now some people can say what they want to say. Now a lot of people were bored from that fight, because of Devin Haney and the way that he fights. But to me, I think his style is somewhat similar to Floyd Mayweather, but it's a bit different. Now I was not a huge fan of Floyd Mayweather, and I think it had to do with his attitude and this and that. But Devin Haney, he seems like a really humble, down to earth dude. And after, I saw the interviews that he did on the MMA Hour and on the Boxing Voice, and he just seemed like a humble dude. He talked about, yo, I'm willing to fight anybody. I don't care who it is. But he did mention, hey, his people, the two fighters that he does want to take on is Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, this whole fight, I was surprised that he won by decision. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I was like, yo, he's going to have to do something he hasn't done in a while, and that is knock him out. Because you're in Australia, the judges most likely are not on your side, and the home crowd isn't on your side. You're in a foreign country. You're in a country that, he's from Vegas all the way to Australia is on the other side. What is it, like 18 hours? I think that's how long the flight is or something like that. But all the drama that was going on, with that they couldn't get his dad out there, and that day of, he ended up finally, I think it was less than 24 hours is when he finally was able to show up and be there in Devin Haney's corner. So that was awesome to see. But in regards to Devin Haney, yo, like, kudos to him, props to him. He led with the jab. Now, in the whole fight, he led with the jab. Now, some people want to complain, but look, in Boxing 101, when I started learning, right, from my coach, shout out to the coach, shout out to my coach, but when it comes to boxing, after they teach you your stance, yo, widen out your legs, put your legs this way, and this is how you're gonna stand. This is how you stand for a boxing. This is how you stand for boxing, like if you're gonna fight somebody. They teach you the jab, right? They teach you how to throw that jab. And the thing is, when it comes to the jab, that's what's going to set up everything else. If you don't have a jab, there's some fighters that don't. Like how I mentioned, Gervonta Tank Davis, he doesn't really have a jab, but what does he have? He has power. He knows how to counterpunch, and he knows how to connect. Now, an interesting fight between Devin Haney and Gervonta Tank Davis. Yes, it is interesting because guess what? Haney is the guy who is going to be throwing that jab. He's going to be putting you, he's going to be reaching with you. He's going to be putting you in your spot, throwing that jab, where Gervonta Tank Davis is going to be coming in and try to get those power punches into you. He's going to try to hit you with those power punches. So that would be a huge, interesting fight between two different styles. Now, some people can say, hey, Tank has a jab. Okay, but he doesn't really use it. His last fights that I've seen against Pitbull Cruz and Rolando Romero, he was just, he didn't have a jab. He was just throwing, he was boxing his way. Now, when it comes to Devin Haney, compared to the fight before this one, he did the right thing by, throwing that jab, keeping him in his place, keeping George in his place, and it got George irritated, I think I was reading that George didn't get I think it was a body shot. He didn't connect with the body shot until the 6th round. Like, that's what Devin Haney was doing, and that's why people say, oh, Devin Haney gave him a master class, because that's what people were talking about, is that he kept them at his distance. So it would be interesting there. Now, when it comes to Haney and Loma, Loma's still out there in Ukraine. He's still in the war. When will he return, and how will he be when he returns? Not a lot of people do not come back from the war the same. Will he still want to box? I don't know. That is the huge question. And not only that, what shape is he going to be in? He ain't going to be in boxing shape anymore. And to top it off, he's going to want to come back to his family. You think he's going to want to come back and train and just start getting back into it? No, man, that's going to take time. And Devin Haney was talking about possibly moving up to 140. You know, if it wasn't for this George fight, he said that he would have moved up to 140. Now, look, to me, the fights that I want to see him before he takes off to 135 is, you know, Haney and Tank, Haney and Garcia, though, you know, he talked about, you know, Garcia. And I do agree with him to some level of saying, yo, Garcia uses a lot of other people names to sell pay-per-views. Well, not to sell pay-per-views, but to sell fights, right? You have Garcia versus Fortuna this weekend, and what was he talking about again? He was talking about Gervonta Tank Davis, getting the crowd riled up, saying, hey, that's the fight that I want. I don't want no other fight but Tank Davis. Now, to me, you know, I think Garcia and Haney would be a huge fight. Um, Haney, but I mean, Teofimo went up to 140 now, but it would be cool to see Teo and Haney. Let me see, you know, who else? Maybe Haney and Pitbull Cruz. You know, there's a lot of stuff for him to do here in the 135 division, but I get it. He is the undisputed champ, and you know, he has a huge target on his back. Who is gonna want to come up and do that? You know, I think out of all of them, I think we will see a Haney and Tank Davis fight, but I don't believe that fight will happen until next year due to the rematch clause that George Kambosos has. I think he has 30 days. I think he has 30 days from the fight, from, you know, from their first fight. He has 30 days in order to activate that clause, and you know, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, man, again, huge shout out to Devin Haney for beating George Kambosos and bringing those belts back to America. Former lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez will make his 140-pound debut against Pedro Campa on August 13th. Now, that is, you know, like I said, that is interesting because that means that Teofimo has gone up to 140 and he's going to try to conquer that division. So we will see what happens there. Adrian Broner is set to return against Omar Figueroa Jr. on July 23rd with PBC. Now, this is huge because, I mean, let's look at what just happened to Adrian Broner. And, I mean, it makes sense. This fight makes sense. He is taking on someone who isn't, you know, going to be a real threat to him. And that's important for Broner if he wants to get back to where he was in that kind of light. You know, he already had, the thing is, he already has 40 losses, right? He's 34-4-1. And, you know, he beat Giovanni Santiago last time by unanimous decision back in February of 2021. But guess what? People are still remembering more about what happened to him before that, right? He had the loss to Mikey Garcia in 2017. He had the draw against Jesse Vargas, and he then took a loss to Manny Pacquiao in 2019. So he took on Giovanni Santiago in 2021, so it's already been over a year since he last fought. But what I'm talking about that is that was a real questionable fight. I remember a lot of people were saying, hey, Broner lost, but they gave him the fight. So, you know, that was a little bit on the controversial side. So we will see what's going to happen there. Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford are apparently closing in on a deal for an undisputed welterweight championship fight in October that will happen in Las Vegas. I mean, that's when this news came out. I think Floyd Mayweather was talking about, yo, that's fake. They're not even working on a deal, this and that. So it's been back and forward that I've seen that it is real and that it is fake. So, I mean, we've heard that these guys are talking for some while now. I think since last year they've been talking about this, that they've been wanting to make this fight, but they're still trying to figure out the purses, who's the A side, who's the B side, etc. But I mean, all I can say is can I believe it? I don't know. I'm just going to wait until the news are finally, until that news finally breaks. So yeah, man, we'll see there. Eddie Hearn commented on a potential fight between Tommy Fury and Jake Paul, saying, I don't respect. He said, I don't represent Tommy Fury or Jake Paul, but I hear there's a fight happening August 13th, so you might see it. What does this mean? I mean, it'll be huge. Now, look, I'm not saying Tommy Fury is the face of boxing. He is the future of boxing. I'm not saying that at all. But when it comes to Jake Paul, in my opinion, look, let me just share it with you guys. Do I think Jake Paul is a real boxer? No, I don't believe so. I don't believe he's a real boxer until he fights real boxers. Now, Tommy Fury, what do I think of him? Is he, I get it. He's not like Tyson Fury, but he hasn't fought anybody either. This would be a huge fight for Fury. And what would suck is that this, in a way, would represent boxing. What I mean by that is a lot of people are saying, hey, Jake Paul doesn't belong in boxing. He's fighting MMA fighters. He's fighting guys who've never had pro fights before. And he's over here calling himself a boxer. Look, the positive from Jake Paul is that he's bringing in casuals back into boxing. He's super famous on YouTube. He has a lot of drama around his life that people love. But he hasn't fought anybody. If he would fight real names, etc., cool, he would get more credit from me and more credit from, people who really love and talk about boxing. So him going up against Tommy Fury, now, like I said, Tommy Fury isn't a real big name. He isn't Tyson Fury, right? And I get it, he's starting out his career, but he hasn't had any memorable wins. He hasn't beaten anybody yet. So, and this is what I mean that it would suck, is the boxing world would be on Tommy Fury's shoulders, because it would be on him to put Jake Paul in his place, to show him, hey, this is for real boxers, people who've been dedicating themselves since they were little. So it would be interesting what happens there. Anyways, I don't want to get too caught up in this, but yeah, that's just how I see it. Will this fight really happen? It's been in the talks since last year. We'll see. Who knows, right? Anyways, moving on. Joe Cordina knocked out Ogagwa in the second round to become the new IBF super featherweight champion. So congrats to him. I saw the fight. I didn't see it live because it was, I forgot what I was doing, but I did throw it on the zone after. And yeah, that's basically, that's what happened. It was a really good, first round. It was contested really well. But after that, he just knocked him out in the second round, and that was it, David Morrell gets the TKO victory over Kelvin Henderson this past week in round 4, and he is calling out none other than David Benavidez. Will David Benavidez respond? There's already been some response by Benavidez' father saying that that's who they want next, that he's talking a lot of trash, that it's time to get in the ring. It's time to bring these guys together, get that contract signed so they can get in the ring and they can really go at it. So we will see what happens there. Also, this past weekend, Stephen Fulton got the unanimous decision victory over Danny Roman, and he is basically saying that he wants Mordejan Akhmadashvili, who is 10-0 and is the current WBA and IBF champion. So he does want to unify and basically go off and become undisputed. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now, this is a huge question that I have, right? Let's get into this question is, with everybody wanting to be undisputed, what does that mean for the sport? Now, I am in 2 Facebook groups, and I posted them in there. I posted it in there, and I asked the community, people who are part of the boxing community, saying, what does that mean? What does it really mean? A lot of people are saying, hey, it means less. I'm going to go off. I'm not going to read their names because I didn't say, hey, I'm going to talk about this on my podcast, and I'll read your name on my podcast, so I'm not going to do that. But, somebody was saying less ducking. It says it doesn't mean anything unless these guys actually want to get in the ring. Someone else said good times. Someone else said less champions. You know, another person said it's very easy to get undisputed today. Someone else said it's good. Another person said, holy sweet bearded Jesus, man. That's exactly what the game was and should be again. One champion per weight class. Forget all the expansionists, watered down garbage with these countless belts, division titles, catch weight classes, etc., etc. Back in my day, there were 8. That's 8 weight classes with 8 titles run by the WBA and the WBC, who balanced each other out and found a way to agree on the proper champions and the top 10 contender ratings. And he just keeps going on. Another person said undisputed only means something if you fight every challenge in the division. Someone else said it'll be a way for them to rack up the dough with title defenses. Another person commented saying much better when only one world champion and 15-round title fights. Now, and Devin Haney talked about that. He said, hey, I would have been in there. I would have lasted 15 rounds if I had to. Now, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I mean, it is an interesting question to throw up. I guess an interesting question to throw up here is, should these title fights go back to 15 rounds? I don't know. That would be interesting, but yeah. So anyways, a lot of people were in agreement. They were saying, hey, it's a good thing for boxing. And a lot of people were saying that it's a bad thing for boxing. It all just depends on how you see it. For me, it is interesting in the sense that one person is going to hold all the belts. But Haney did talk about it, that if he goes up and he doesn't lose, he's going to vacate the titles. So the titles are going to be, all the belts will be scattered back to, WBC, WBA, etc. So you will then go off and have multiple champions. But my thing is this. There's multiple champions because there's money. So what I mean by that is you have the WBC, it makes the money that it makes, the WBO, WBA, etc., right? Each belt brings its own type of money. So having them all in one place, it is interesting with one, having them all with one fighter, it makes it super interesting. That, to me, undisputed means that you conquered the division, right? Like Canelo Alvarez at 168, etc. You have these fighters who have conquered the division. But what it also means is, hey, what are the chances for these guys? Sometimes these up-and-coming fighters make names by becoming the IBF champion, by becoming the WBA champion. But now that they're all in one place with one fighter, it makes it a little bit more, I guess, harder / it's a bigger challenge that you have to go through in order to get your title shot against the guy who is, the guy or the woman who is undisputed. I don't know if that makes sense, actually. I don't know. I'll come back to that eventually. Now, let's keep going with what's been going on in the boxing world. Derek Chisora will rematch against Kubrat Pulev in a heavyweight clash on July 9th at the O2 Arena in London. Also this week, the Monster Inoue knocked out Donaire in round 2 to unify the WBA, WBC, and IBF bantamweight world titles. Honestly, he knocked them out in round 2. I didn't watch the fight. It was way too early here, where I'm at, to wake up. It was it 5:30 Eastern time? So that made it 5:30 Eastern, which is what? I think it was like at 2-3 in the morning here where I live. So I was not going to wake up that early. But the Monster Inoue did declare that he wants to become undisputed. He wants to become the undisputed bantamweight world champion. He currently holds the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles, while Paul Butler holds the WBO title. The WBO title. Paul Butler commented saying, "I hope he does want to try and be undisputed. It'd be an absolute honor to step in the ring with the pound for pound great." Joe will come up with a game plan. It'll be a tough task, but it's a task I'm willing to take. So will these? It looks like it's pretty much going to be set there for these guys to go off and battle for fight for undisputed. So we will see what happens there. Now, another thing that I want to bring in is Jermall Charlo's comments about Canelo and David Benavidez. This is what Charlo had to say, who actually his fight just got postponed due to a back injury. So you're coming out and talking trash. That doesn't make sense to me, Charlo. It just really doesn't. But anyways, these were his comments. He said via FightHype.com, he says, I'm the biggest fight for any boxer out here right now. I'm one of the biggest boxers out there. Why not go ahead and take the real risk and fight Canelo, where I could put it all on the line rather than fight David Benavidez, who has nothing to offer. He then said, I'd still fight David Benavidez and use him as a stepping stone to get to Canelo if that's what they want me to do, but they're not setting that up. So, to me, it's interesting. Like I said, his comments are really interesting there because to me, Charlo and Benavidez would be a huge fight. And this is what I've told people. These guys want Canelo. But Canelo's taking on Triple G in September, and then we'll see what happens with the Bivol rematch. But like I said, he is taking on Canelo. He wants to take on Canelo. All these guys want to take on Canelo, but why not take on each other? Charlo, if you're the bigger name, why not force it upon your team and say, hey, I want Benavidez. You're going to talk about they're not setting that up, then figure out a way and get that fight set up. And prove you are the top dog who can get things set up when he lays the hammer down and say, hey, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get. I want Benavidez, so once I beat Benavidez, I can go up and fight Canelo. But he doesn't want to do it. To me, what I've seen from Benavidez, he would put that fight would make me nervous as a huge Canelo fan. It really would. Charlo, not really. I think Canelo can beat Charlo. But Canelo Benavidez, yes, that is the tougher challenge there. So that's just me. That's just what I'm saying. Like, you're over here talking, your fight just got, it got rescheduled. It's going to get rescheduled, etc. But you're saying, hey, that's not what they're setting up for me. Then why not make them set it up for you? If Benavidez isn't a big name for you, then be like, hey, then prove it. If he's not a big name for you, then prove it by doing what? Then by telling these people, hey, I want Benavidez, I'll take him out, and then I'll go up against Canelo. But if you're not doing that, then I don't know, bro. Talking a lot of smack for what exactly? I don't know. Shakur Stevenson and Emmanuel Navarrete is reportedly in the talks to potentially happen in August/September as a defense of Shakur's WBC and WBO super featherweight world titles. So I've seen reported things on this. I've seen mixed things on this. Let me see. Let me search it up real quick. From BoxingNews247.com, it says Shakur Stevenson says that Emmanuel Navarrete priced himself out. Just know I was with it, said Shakur Stevenson on Twitter about his negotiations with Emmanuel Navarrete falling apart. He capped, he not really with it, priced himself out. I'm down, but y'all give me my credit for that. Easy money, pay me my money, and I'm ready to go. So, yeah, that fight fell through, and like I talked about earlier, he basically really wants to take on Joe Cardina for the IBF title that he just won. And Shakur Stevenson is chasing undisputed. So we will see what happens there. After the fight with Oscar Valdez, which I was really disappointed because I wanted Valdez to win it. But yeah, man, Shakur Stevenson he's on a different level. Valdez did not look on par to what we saw against, actually his fight before that too. He just hasn't been the same fighter that his last two fights, and his fight against Stevenson is where he finally paid for it. Now let's talk about Let's talk about what's happening this weekend. First of all, let's talk about the International Boxing Hall of Fame and everybody who is going into the Hall of Fame. They're finally doing the event. It started back on June 9th, and it's going on again. It's going on to June 12th. And it's 3 Hall of Fame classes that are going in, and I think it all had to do with COVID and with COVID and not being able to do the events how they usually do every year. So the class from 2020, you have Juan Manuel Marquez, Shane Mosley, Christy Salters Martin, Bernard Hopkins, Lucia Richker, and Barbara Buttrick going in from the class of 2020. In 2021, their Hall of Fame class, you have Andre Ward, Layla Ali, Floyd Money Mayweather, Ann Wolfe, Waldemir Klitschko, and Marianne Trimia. And from this year, you have Miguel Cotto, Holly Holm, Roy Jones Jr., Regina Halmich, and James Toney. So shout out to all of them who are going into the Hall of Fame. This Saturday, you also have Jaime Munguia, who is 39-0. 31 of those are by knockout, going up against Jimmy Kelly, who is 26-2. 10 of those wins being by knockout, and I am going with none other than Mr. Jaime Munguia to pick up the victory and go 40-0. Now, he was talking about Charlo as well, saying that's who he wants to fight, and that's apparently he said that they made the offer and that they did not accept the offer. So let me actually pull it up. Here it is. Here we go. Okay, here it is. According to Mike Coppinger of ESPN, PBC wanted the fight on Showtime, but Golden Boy Promotions wanted their partner DAZN involved. PBC were only willing to give DAZN rights for Mexico and UK, and talks hit a stalemate when Golden Boy refused to reply. It says the WBC has now mandated that Munguia fight Carlos Adames to determine who will ultimately go for the belt against Charlo. Where is it? Hold up. That's a little bit of the older news. That's March. I'm trying to find. In terms of Charlo, we were ready to make the fight, Oscar De La Hoya claimed during a press conference. Otherwise discussed this weekend's clash between Munguia and England's Jimmy Kilran Kelly. We were ready to do whatever it takes to get Jaime Munguia the fight that he wants, the fight that everyone has been asking for. Obviously, one thing about Charlo and the whole PBC stable is they hide behind Al Heyman. That's the bottom line. We don't want to make ordinary fights. We want to make the best fights. When our fighters are ready, we want to make the fights with the very best. I'm hoping Charlo grows some BALLS and tells his management team, I want to fight Jaime Munguia. I want to fight the very best. So it is interesting there. We will see what will actually happen. But yeah, that's by the looks of it. It had to do with, Golden Boy wanting the fight on their pay-per-view, as wanting the fight on DAZN, and PBC saying, hey, no, you guys can only get it for Mexico and UK, and we're going to do it here in the US. So it's just interesting to see if that fight will eventually ever happen. Now, let's see what else is happening. Oh, yeah. This weekend, you also have Edgar Berlanga versus Romer Alexis Angulo. And, yeah, I'm going to go with Berlanga to pick up the win there. Now, finally, this whole boxing talk, this whole boxing section, I want to finish off with this question. What does it really mean to be pound for pound? I want you guys to really think about that. What accomplishments do you have to have in order to be considered pound for pound one of the greats? ESPN released their pound for pound rankings in the men's. Number 1, they have Crawford. Number 2, they have Inoue. Number 3, they have Spencer Jr. Number 4, Canelo Alvarez. Number 5, Fury. Number 6, Usyk. Number 7, Lomachenko. Number 8, Dmitry Bivol. Number 9, Shakur Stevenson. And cracking in at number 10 is Devin Haney. I'll talk about this next week, but I just want you guys to think about that question. What does it really mean to be considered pound for pound? All right. So now we are done with all of the boxing talk. Let's get ready to talk about what is happening in the MMA world. First, let's talk about what happened last Saturday. You had Alexander Volkov defeating Jarinzo Rozenstruik via TKO punches at 2 minutes and 12 seconds of round 1. Now, I'm only going to talk about that fight because that's the only fight I saw from UFC Vegas 56. That is my fault. I had some family stuff going on, but I did watch highlights of the other fights. But when I came home, I threw it on. I said, oh, UFC is going on because it was early in the day. I threw it on, and that's the fight that I saw, and basically just saw the end of that fight. Now, let's talk about Rozenstruik comments on the fight. This is what he tweeted. He said, "Hi, everyone. I'm kind of confused on how the fight went, and I'm disappointed that it was stopped. It was definitely a troubling situation, but I was far from giving up the fight. Did someone lay flat on the ground with his eyes shut? That's what we call a knockout. UFC Vegas 56, Alexander and I just started exchanging some heavy strikes, the stuff you all wanted to see. Big up to Alex Drago Volkov for taking the fight. I've no notable damage, and I like to fight again very soon." This is what he said. Sorry if I read it a little bit weird. I was just making sure that I read it correctly. But yeah, so he was hit with the shot. You know, he did look dazed. He did look a little bit dazed and confused, whether he wants to admit it or not. But, you know, he fell to the ground and there was a couple punches thrown. Now, this is what's causing a huge spark, a huge debate when it comes to Herb Dean, the referee, because he was the referee who stopped the fight. And there's a lot of questions there on what really happened. Should the fight have been stopped? Should have not been stopped? Look, this is one of the things, like I said, I'm just getting into MMA. I'm just getting into the UFC. I've always been a fan, but I'm just really grasping it and really understanding it more and more each and every day. Look, I think it was stopped more for his safety. Do I believe the fight could have gone on? Now, see, this is the thing. People will complain and get mad if a fight is stopped too early, but then people will complain and get mad if the fighter is on the ground for 10 seconds and someone's just throwing punches at a knocked out body. That's what I've seen before. So no matter what, dude, no one's really going to be happy. And I believe he did the safety thing. I haven't seen Dana's... I don't think there's any Dana White comments on that. Let me see. Yeah, I didn't see any Dana White comments, but, you know, Francis Ngannou, you know, he tweeted saying early stoppage with the question mark. So it is interesting there. Like I said, it's interesting to see what's going to be happening next after that. But yeah, man, that's just one of those that I want to throw it to you guys. See, what do you guys think? Do you think it was an early stoppage? Do you think the fight should have kept going? Also, Movsar Eloev picks up the win over Dan Ige. Sorry, I'm trying to learn how to pronounce these names. Moving to 16-0, and he wants a shot at Alexander Volkanovski. Felicia Herring officially retired following her loss to Carolina Kowalkiewicz. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. That is just my bad. Yeah, sorry to not being able to pronounce that. But yeah, Felicia Herring finally called it quits after her loss. I think she did have a couple losses in a row, so it's understanding that, you know, she called it quits and she had to retire. Now let's talk about Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler throwing shots at each other. This is what Dustin Poirier said. He said, "If you're getting hurt by Tony Ferguson and dropped by Oliveira, guys like me, guys like Connor, if we touch your chin, it's going to be bad." Michael Chandler responded saying, "Nobody gives a rip about your wannabe. Doesn't make sense. Lost your shine, so you're trying to steal everybody else's. So you're trying to steal everybody else's shine. Backdoor MMA math. Zip it. Now this is interesting. Let these guys go at it. That's what I'm saying. Let these guys fight, because, man, will this be a showdown that we will not stop talking about. Now, okay. Now, if I'm looking at it correctly, these guys haven't fought yet. So it would be interesting to see if these guys, what would really happen if these guys were to finally fight. I think Poirier would beat up. I think he would honestly manhandle Michael Chandler. I think Michael Chandler talks a lot. And I get it, he had this huge knockout against Tony Ferguson. And it makes sense for these guys to fight. I think, this is the fight that I think a lot of people would love to see. And it would be a huge draw for the UFC. It really would. Why they haven't done it, I don't know. Maybe it has to do with both fighters really hating each other, and not wanting to agree to a fight where they're both going to make money off each other, right? Dustin says, he's commented before saying that he doesn't want Michael Chandler to make any dollar, any cent off of him. So that is interesting there. So we'll just see how that's going to hold, how that will be. What does the future hold for Conor McGregor? I saw something about a potential rumored fight between him and George Masvidal for the BMF title. I think that would be a huge fight there. I mean, I get it what people want to say and think about the BMF title, but it would be cool. I think that's a title that should be on someone like Conor McGregor. Now, when it comes to Conor, and will he really ever return back to the UFC? He doesn't need to. He has a lot of money. He still has, he made a lot of money against Floyd Mayweather in that boxing fight. And ever since then, his career basically skyrocketed. He has a lot of business deals. I think he has his own whiskey brand. He has a bunch of stuff that he has been able to make way more money than he ever made in the UFC. Though when he comes to the UFC, he is one of the highest paid fighters because he is one of the biggest draws in the UFC. So we will see what happens there. Dominic Cruz versus Marlon Vera is in the works for August 13. Now let's talk about everything that's going on when it comes to the flyweight division between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. All right, so Figueiredo's comments about the interim title, this is what he said. He said, "The belt is mine. There's no other belt except for this plastic belt. This joke they're doing between Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara France, if we have a chat and the UFC can increase my earnings inside the organization, then I'll stay in the division. But if nothing happens, I'll be forced to move up. I'll stay in the flyweight division if they increase my purse." Now, to that, Brandon Moreno said, basically saying that, hey, you know what, you could call it a plastic toy belt, but to me it's a beautiful belt, the flyweight title. And Brandon Moreno actually ended up leaving the Entrum gym. This is what he said. He said, "So I decided to make one of the toughest changes of my life because all my life I trained at Entrum gym. I still love all my training partners, but it was time for a change." He was talking about that on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. So it is interesting there. We're going to see how this goes between, I'm a huge Brandon Moreno fan, the first Mexican born to become a UFC champion. So kudos to him for what he did. It sucked that his reign didn't last long, but it's going to be interesting to see him versus Kai Kara France. So we're going to see how that ends up going. But look, this is just another thing when it comes to the UFC, something that, in this podcast I want to, break down into is UFC fighters aren't paid a lot. They fight, honestly, they'll fight more than boxers and some of my favorite boxers, but they're not paid a lot. And I think what it has to do is, so let me, I'm just going to get into this then real quick. Going to go off this little rant. To me, the UFC is kind of like the WWE nowadays, right? The WWE, no one can be bigger than the company, right? They don't allow that anymore. And I think that's how the UFC is, though some of them have been lucky to become bigger than the company itself, like a Conor McGregor, but they don't want that. They don't want anybody to be bigger than what the UFC is. And I think that might have to do why even Conor McGregor hasn't gotten any fights. I mean, I get it. He's coming off an injury, a really bad injury, but even then, he was hardly fighting ever since he took the fight against Conor McGregor. Ever since Conor took the fight against Floyd Mayweather and stepped into the boxing ring and collected that huge payday. Sorry for the stumbling on the words, but yeah, like he collected that huge payday, and he's hardly had any UFC fights then because that's what it is. The UFC is the machine, right? And they don't want anybody to be bigger than the machine. And that's what I see is going on with the World Wrestling Entertainment, with the WWE, is nobody can be bigger than the company, not anymore, right? The last big name for the WWE that was bigger than the company was John Cena. And ever since then, they're not allowing anybody to be bigger than the company. So it's going to be interesting to see what the UFC is going to do. You know, for me, I wish the fighters would get paid bigger than they do. Dana White always talks trash when it comes to boxing, saying, oh, it's a broken business, it's impossible to fix. It's a broken business, really, when George Kambosos just made he had his biggest purse against Devin Haney, and he made $10 million. Devin Haney made 2.8, but it don't matter because Devin Haney, he just went from the dream to the bank. He got 2.8 million, and he became undisputed. So it's time. The UFC needs to step up. It really, really needs to step up. So let's finally finish off and previewing UFC 275, which is happening actually tonight. I talked about the boxing fights that are happening tonight. So let's talk about what's going to be happening tonight as well for UFC 275. Let me pull up the card. All right, so here we go. In the main card, we have Jack Della Maddalena versus Ramazan Emeev. We have Jake Matthews versus Andre Filajo. We have Zhang Weili versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Sorry for not pronouncing that name correctly. And then in the co-main event, we have the women's flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko versus Talia Santos, and then we have Glover Teixeira versus Jiri Prochazka. Damn, I'm horrible at pronouncing names. I'm predicting. Let me see. I'm gonna predict we're gonna get a new lightweight heavyweight champ, and it's crazy though because Glover, he is 42 years old. Right? Let me see. Am I correct on that? Yes, he's 42 years old. That's insane. Like a lot of the UFC champions, they're in their mid to late 30s, which is crazy because that's not something you really see in boxing anymore. Boxing is usually a young person's. No, I mean, even then, a lot of the champions are in their 30s, actually. But, I mean, Glover is 42. But I think Jiri's going to get the best of him tonight, so I think he'll pick up that victory, and I think Valentina will remain the women's flyweight champion. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. That's going to cover for this episode here. Yeah, sorry, a little bit of a rush here on this episode, trying to get it done, trying to get it to you guys before the fights and everything happens tonight. So thank you guys for listening. This has been Kevin Solorzano. This has been the Knockout Zone. I want to thank you guys for listening. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment down, let me know what you think down below. And I think I should be back on the next episode. Will drop on Tuesday morning, reviewing everything that happened over the weekend, man. So yeah, y'all have a good weekend, and if you aren't watching the fights, you should be. Like I said, we got Jaime Munguia. Jaime Munguia will be fighting tonight on the Zone. Let me re-pull that up. Yeah, we got Jaime Munguia versus Jimmy Kelly tonight for the super middleweight title that he is the WBO. No, actually, he's not the super middle. He's just fighting in the middleweight division. He's fighting in the 160. So we got we got Jaime Munguia versus Jimmy Kelly, and then we got Edgar Berlanga versus Angulo tonight, and then we also have UFC 275. So if you guys are trying to figure out what to do for tonight on this Saturday, yeah, man, it's going to be jam-packed with combat sports. So again, thank you guys for listening. Once again, this has been the Knockout Zone. This has been Kevin Solorzano, and I'm officially signing off. I'll see you guys next week.